Moldova, together with the European Union and the United States, is developing a plan for the reintegration of the unrecognized Transnistria region. This was stated by Deputy Prime Minister for Reintegration, Valerio Chiveni.
We are indeed actively working on a strategy or roadmap for reintegration. But, as you know, sensitive issues require caution. We need to carefully consider the steps that will yield results over time. We can't disclose every step in real time because that could be harmful.
The official added that these developments will be made public at the appropriate time. On freedom, political analyst and former member of the Moldovan parliament, Oazu Nantoy, explained what further steps the country should take on this issue.
The authorities in Chisinau need to establish a dialogue with the residents of the left bank. Those residents who understand that they are living in a trap called the Transnistrian Moldavian Republic, and that a shared future with the right bank in the context of European integration could provide them with guarantees for the protection of fundamental rights and freedoms, as well as the right to a normal life in a democratic country.
At the same time, Oazu Nantoy emphasized that it is impossible to negotiate with Russia.
At the negotiating table with Russia, the only talks, in quotation marks, that can be held are about the surrender of the sovereignty of the Republic of Moldova. Russia is an aggressor country. These so-called negotiations are a trap in which Moldova has been helplessly floundering for more than 30 years. And it was Russia that imposed this mistaken framework for perceiving the Transnistrian issue, as if on the left bank of the Dniester, more precisely on the left bank of the Dniester, there supposedly live people with whom we are enemies, and that Russian peacekeepers are needed so that we don't kill each other. This is an absolutely false premise, but one that benefits the Russian Federation.
Meanwhile, the government of the Republic of Moldova has announced that it is denouncing the agreement with Russia regarding cultural centers. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Moldova has already officially notified the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs about this. The decision will take effect 6 months after the official notification, so the agreement under which the Russian Cultural Center operates will cease to be valid on July 4th, 2026. It is known that the agreement was signed in 1998 and came into force on July 4th, 2001. It was concluded for a period of 5 years. After the expiration of the term, it was automatically extended for another 5 years. In November of this year, the government decided to terminate the agreement with Russia, as a result of which the Russian house in Chisinau is to be closed. The Minister of Culture stated that the center does not represent Russian culture, but Russian aggression. Maria Zakharova, a representative of the Russian Foreign Ministry, called this decision by Chisinau an anti-Russian initiative. Ukraine has frozen part of the assets of Transnistria's main oligarch, Viktor Gushon, who is a co-founder of the Sheriff Holding Company, according to the journalistic investigation Zona de Securitate. The decision to freeze Gushon's assets was made after the prosecutor's office determined that companies associated with him were supplying goods and services to the military-industrial complex of the Russian Federation. In particular, the cooperation was carried out through the Moldova Salute factory in the unrecognized Transnistria. The investigation also reveals the key individuals involved in this scheme, the method of creating intermediary companies in the Russian Federation, and the direct connections that likely lead to the Sheriff Holding Company. The Sheriff Holding Company has established an almost monopolistic position in Transnistria, controlling trade, the oil market, telecommunications, and the media. Viktor Gushon's fortune is estimated at $2 billion, according to various sources.
The Kremlin is increasing its presence in Transnistria. This was reported by the media, citing sources in the main intelligence directorate of the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. It is noted that mobilization activities have been intensified in the territory of Moldova, temporarily occupied by Russia. In particular, reservists are being called up in the unrecognized republic, and weapons are being taken out of storage. In addition, drone production facilities and training centers for drone operators have already been established in Transnistria. According to sources in Ukrainian intelligence, these actions have significantly increased the risk of Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups infiltrating Ukraine from Transnistrian territory. In this way, the Kremlin aims to divert some of Ukraine's resources to counter these new threats.
The Russian Federation hopes to destabilize the situation in Moldova and create a point of tension on the border with the southern regions. Due to Russian actions, the risk of sabotage groups infiltrating Ukrainian territory is increasing.
Intelligence sources add that this is the beginning of a new Russian hybrid operation ahead of the so-called presidential elections in the Pridnestrovian Moldavian Republic in 2026. It is noted that the Kremlin wants to once again make Tiraspol dependent on free Russian gas, boost the ratings of its proxies, and quietly increase its military presence. Moscow also intends to send intelligence agents to Transnistria, whose task is to intensify crisis phenomena, sow chaos through information operations, carry out provocations, and conduct sabotage activities. Back in June of this year, former Moldovan Prime Minister Dorin Risian stated that Russia wants to deploy 10,000 troops in the occupied Transnistrian region and install a pro-Kremlin government in Chisinau. This assessment is based on data from Moldovan intelligence.
One can imagine the pressure and influence that 10,000 soldiers would exert on the southwestern part of Ukraine, but also on Romania, which is a NATO member.
Currently, there are about 1,500 Russian soldiers in Transnistria, but in reality, most of them are local residents who joined the Russian army. The Kremlin also tried to influence the outcome of the elections that took place in Moldova in September this year. Despite this, President Maia Sandu's party won the majority of seats. The pro-Russian Patriotic Bloc tried to challenge the election results in court, but without success. The results were ultimately confirmed. Earlier, it was reported that another gas crisis is brewing in Transnistria. According to media reports, due to reduced gas supplies, major enterprises in the region have suspended operations, and the key power plant has switched from gas to coal. It was noted that the shortage is linked to a delay in the next gas payment, which Transnistria receives and for which Russia pays.
The Soviet Union didn't really collapse, it just shrank down to the size of a tiny gut that everyone knows as Transnistria. This fragment of a concentration camp got stuck between Moldova and Ukraine, poisoning the lives of both. But most of all, it poisons the lives of the unfortunate people, the population unlucky enough to live in this musty museum of communism.
The vibrant and memorable 90s, specifically the year 1994, a truly iconic period.
1. And so has the standard of living. Not to mention the sense of hopelessness under the watchful gaze of countless Lenin monuments. A true park of the Soviet era.
This is Lenin, the main Lenin. He has become bigger and cleaner. And in those places where the old plaster is falling off, everything is repaired by workers dressed in gear reminiscent of Soviet-era gas workers.
A normal life in Transnistria is impossible, because it was deliberately created as a depressed backwater to destabilize the situation in the region. For Moscow, it's nothing more than a springboard for expansion against its neighbors. A military warehouse. As long as the Kremlin controls Transnistria, it will not allow people there to live well. Because Russia needs a desperate, disenfranchised crowd that can be thrown into the line of fire at any moment.
I've been living there since Soviet times, and, I feel like this will get resolved one way or another. Somehow it will work itself out.
Since the start of the full-scale invasion, the occupiers have used Transnistria as a threat to Ukraine, to tie down its forces. After all, there is a Russian contingent stationed there. However, now it is in complete isolation and is praying to every god that the Ukrainians don't wipe out this enclave. No one has any doubt that if the defense forces wanted to, they could quickly eliminate the last stronghold of communism.
It would disappear.
Since February 24th, 2022, people on the left bank have been trying to keep a low profile. They keep their heads down and stay quiet because they understand that Ukraine is not inclined toward diplomatic niceties if, God forbid, some kind of armed provocation occurs.
But Moscow constantly inflates the Transnistrian threat during critical moments. After Ukraine started sinking the shadow fleet of Erythrea in the Black Sea, the Pale Fuhrer had a fit of hysteria and began threatening to capture Odessa.
This is what the Ukrainian armed forces are doing. Right now it's piracy. But what countermeasures? First of all, we will expand the range of such strikes, ours, on port facilities and on ships, on vessels that enter Ukrainian ports. Well, the most radical way is to cut Ukraine off from the sea. Then it would be impossible for them to carry out the operation at all.
What?
Of course, Russia didn't seize Odessa and the coastline only because it didn't want to. And now, when the leader gives the order, in 3 days they'll cross the Dnipro and the valiant Black Sea Fleet will lay siege to the ports.
Of course, yes, of course, absolutely, of course.
Obviously, these threats are nothing more than passing gas in a puddle. But the Kremlin's KGB types still snapped to attention and tried to save Putin's Botoxed face. If you need to create the appearance of a threat to Odessa, then Transnistria is the perfect and proven option. Ukrainian intelligence and the American Institute for the Study of War simultaneously reported that some strange ferment is starting in the Soviet gut. There, they are drafting reservists, taking weapons out of storage and refurbishing them, as well as opening drone production centers and training operators.
The propaganda there is exactly the same as in Russia. Starting from kindergarten, they march, dress in military uniforms, and constantly play military games. So there are absolutely no problems there with finding people. And they train and drill the locals. And these recent reports about opening drone training centers are exactly about that. They have no problem finding people for it. The drones are probably at least partly assembled by locals.
On top of that, Moscow has also sent additional agents and military advisors to Transnistria by special delivery. Overall, visually it looks like preparations for something bad. There is a growing risk of sabotage groups infiltrating Ukrainian territory. The drone threat is also increasing. Right now, Odessa is being terrorized by long-range UAVs and missiles, but even FPV drones could reach southern Ukraine from Transnistria. And we all know how the occupiers use them to hunt the residents of Kherson like it's a safari.
Drones even fly into apartments and private houses.
You're just walking around and suddenly you see, hello.
To move around the city, rescuers and volunteers use drone detectors.
Oh, that's Sakharok. It shows the frequencies when drones are flying overhead. It shows the number of drones, what kind of drones, like Mavics.
At the same time, Russian propaganda has once again started talking about Russian Odessa. Although just a month ago, even the most hardcore ultra-patriots honestly admitted that this was no longer something to dream about.
The loss of all this means nothing to Great Russia. Rostov, here you go. This is our warm, very cozy Russian Odessa that everyone dreams about. So instead of dreaming about that, there's Rostov. Go take a walk around the Bogatyanovka or Grabilovka neighborhoods. Yes, I understand that sounds pretty harsh. I mean, they themselves don't even want it.
Moscow has clearly flaunted its mangy tail in Transnistria to create the illusion of a real threat. According to the GUR, this is forcing Ukrainian troops to strengthen their rear positions and counteract sabotage more intensively. And of course, there will be attempts at sabotage. Although in reality, Putin can only fantasize about capturing Odessa while in the sauna with Medvedev.
Commander of the group, the various troop groupings must consistently continue to effectively carry out their assigned tasks in very strict accordance with the detailed plan of the ongoing special military operation.
Are you messing with us? We're suffering here with him and he's confusing us on purpose.
The actual strength of the occupiers in Transnistria is quite modest. There are about 1,500 Russian soldiers there, and their main job is guarding warehouses. There are also the so-called armed forces, the so-called PMR. That's another 5,000 militants or so. They are armed with old Soviet equipment and are completely cut off from Russian army supplies. Some rotation apparently takes place through Moldova's airports, but that's just a drop in the beer bottle. In other words, Transnistria is not capable of threatening Odessa on its own. As an additional factor, it could have been useful during a naval landing and a continental siege. But the Black Sea Fleet has lost almost all of its landing forces. The ships have hidden themselves on the other side of the sea. And on land, the Russian army negatively captured Kherson and...
No one is willing to be suicidal and take part in any armed provocations against Ukraine.
All this escalation around Transnistria is needed by Moscow for information psychological operations and to distract the Ukrainian defense forces, as well as to destabilize the situation in Moldova. By the way, this is the main purpose of Leninland's existence. The new zombie uprising in Tiraspol just so happens to coincide with statements from Chisinau that Moldova, together with the European Union and the United States, is developing a plan to unify the country. That is, to reintegrate the unrecognized Transnistria.
The reintegration plan, which is being developed together with the European Union and the United States, is not being published officially, as this could harm the final outcome. This was stated by Deputy Prime Minister for Reintegration Valerio Kiver after the cabinet meeting on December 3rd. We need to think through steps that will yield results over time. We cannot disclose all our actions in real time because this could harm the final result.
The new Deputy Prime Minister for Reintegration voiced his position regarding the peacekeeping operation in Transnistria. According to the official, it is time to replace the peacekeeping operation with a civilian mission.
Moldovan Deputy Prime Minister Valeriu Chiveri openly stated that a roadmap is being prepared for returning Transnistria to its homeland. Naturally, such news burns in Moscow. They are afraid that the residents of the concentration camp might be tempted by the prospects of normal development, investment, and EU membership. Moreover, almost all so-called citizens of Transnistria already have a healthy person's passport, that is, a Moldovan one.
The residents of Transnistria themselves no longer know how to identify themselves. In 30 years, there have been 7 referendums on self-determination in the region. But unfortunately, world politicians don't care about the opinion of the local population. That's why every Transnistrian carries at least one passport recognized by the world: Russian, Ukrainian, or Moldovan.
Here's an interesting fact. In October, Deputy Prime Minister Doina Nistor announced that Chisinau plans to invest in a highway that will connect Ukraine and Romania. Ungheni, Chisinau, Odessa. It's being called the new East-West Corridor. The plan is that this road could pass right through Transnistria because it's both economically and geographically advantageous. Naturally, no one is going to build anything on occupied territories. So it is assumed that Transnistria will be deoccupied. At the very least, the plans for this are absolutely real.
Moldova cannot be on the periphery of the European Union without a strong army, without defense capability. With a separatist regime on its border, this is a matter of security guarantees not only for our countries, but also for the entire eastern territory of Europe. This is a joint accession, a collective entry of the Republic of Moldova and Ukraine into the European Union.
In the autumn elections in Moldova, Russia suffered a crushing defeat, and the people chose civilization over barbarism. Even though the Kremlin spared neither money nor effort to push its own Yanukovychs and Medvedchuks into power there, Dodon, who dreams of turning all of Moldova into Transnistria, and some crazed for tuna ready to fight for the Odessa region. I
know how to return Bajak even today. We are not insignificant, we are not powerless, we are not silent. We are crippled by borders drawn with a ruler, and we were deprived of access to the sea through Bujak. The Republic of Moldova has grounds to demand a revision of the borders. We will take back everything that was stolen from us: our name, our history, our language, and our access to the sea.
The residents of Transnistria are slowly beginning to realize that for Russia, they are expendable. Just like the residents of the occupied Donbass. They will be traded without a second thought for some lucrative gas contract or mobilized and thrown into a bloody diversionary maneuver. It probably doesn't feel very good to see yourself as a ticking time bomb. The people of Transnistria must decide for themselves whether they want to be human beings or powerless cannon fodder. I want to remind you that this video is created for entertainment purposes and contains elements of satire and irony. All facts and events are presented in a hyperbolized or exaggerated manner to convey a comedic or dramatic effect. We do not aim to mislead, but simply focus on humor. Please take this with a smile.